So up next, we'll have Pat Barry to introduce today's speaker. Come on up, Pat. And you don't have to rush because we're ahead of schedule.
Well, let's use our time wisely. Thank you very much, President Rachel. And so I'll use a little bit of extra time. I just want to say a special thank you and recognition to our President Rachel. She is 2/3 of the way here through her Rotary year. And I just want to say, Rachel, you're doing an awesome job. Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And it is a great day to be a Rotarian. Doesn't everybody agree? Woohoo! There we go. Great club. It's my privilege and honor to introduce to you today our speaker, Julie Cooper. Julie is the executive director of the Baker Institute for Children with Hearing Loss. So, Akili, this is right down your alley here. You're gonna learn a lot today. So I hope your career path follows Julie Cooper. So here you go. Julie was born and raised in the great state of Michigan and is a graduate of Calvin College. Go Knights! She went on to earn a master's degree in speech language pathology from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. If Darren Ravasapor were here, we'd give him a shout out, but he's not here. So prior to joining the Baker Institute, Julie served as the speech language pathologist on the cochlear implant team at Stanford University. In her spare time, she's providing listening and spoken language therapy, LSL, at the Weingarten Children's Center in Redwood City, California. Julie mentioned to me that her favorite part about leading the Baker Institute programs is empowering families and witnessing the beautiful results of well-spoken children who go on to lead inspiring lives. Julie resides in San Carlos, California with her husband, Dan, and her 3 very active sons. And she's with us today to talk about a lot of things, but one of them is the Listen to Me conference that she founded at Stanford and is in the process of expanding this program to Hawaii, Kenya, and virtually to Latin America, the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. So I would like to ask you all to welcome Julie with a warm Medford Rotary welcome.
Hey, thank you for the introduction and thank you for inviting me to come and speak with you all today. I'm just happy to be here. And I do still work at Stanford. So the way that our organization works is that the Baker Institute, which is the nonprofit, does all the funding for our work. And then Stanford handles all of the HR. So our faculty and staff are all involved in presenting at our conferences. So it's a really wonderful partnership to have between the two of us. And I will talk a little bit more about that in my next slide. So I'll start just by talking a little bit about how our organization was started and also just information about hearing loss in general. Does anyone here have any personal connections with anyone who wears a cochlear implant or hearing aids? A few of you, awesome. Okay, great. Oh, this is working now? Oh, great. Perfect, okay, thanks. And then we'll talk a little bit about our mission and our work and our expansion. Okay, so in the United States, 1 in every 300 children are born with permanent hearing loss. And there are about 34 million children globally who are impacted by hearing loss. So it's kind of interesting to think about cochlear implant timeline. I think that a lot of people that I talk to feel like, oh, cochlear implants must be a new thing. And while the technology is also always improving, they were invented quite a while ago. So 1961 was the first cochlear implant implanted at House Ear in Los Angeles. And then in 1964, they had the first multi-channel implant. So the first one was a single channel, which just means there is only one electrode stimulating the cochlea. If you think about the cochlea, that's kind of where the brain receives information that it perceives as sound. And it's a little spiral shape inside your ear in the inner part. And it's about the same size as your pinky fingernail. And if you think about the spiral of the cochlea as like a piano, just wound up in a spiral, so the different parts of the cochlea are responsible for interpreting different frequencies of sound, low to high pitch. So the first implant only had one electrode stimulating that, which provided access to sound, but not the spectrum of frequencies. But then, oops, go back. The multi-channel implant was first implanted in 64 at Stanford, and that provided a more rich variety of access to sound. And since then, the technology has just been getting more and more advanced. 1990, the FDA approved the multi-channel implant for 24-month-olds and older. And then in 2000, that FDA age was lowered to 12 months. And then just in 2020, it was lowered again to 9 months. And at Stanford, we regularly appeal the FDA guideline to implant children as young as 6 and 7 months, because we actually see improved outcomes between a child implanted at 6 months versus even 12 months. So we know that hearing really occurs in the brain. So the longer there is a delay in the brain accessing sound, then the more likely that that part of the brain, the auditory cortex, is going to be actually recruited to be used for other information. So the earlier we can get that brain access to sound, the better the outcomes. So kids that receive cochlear implants can actually, if they get the implant young enough, they can actually learn to speak beautifully, go to regular mainstream kindergarten classrooms, and they don't usually need sign language. So we do think that sign language is a beautiful language, and it is necessary for some children who might have other disorders or maybe didn't get the implant young enough. But the vast majority of kids, if they're identified early and they get the access to the technology early, they can learn to speak. And so many families choose to do what we call listening and spoken language as the approach to helping their child learn to communicate. So a quick video on how an implant works.
Shape our vision for the world. So when their vision is at risk due to wet AMD.
Thank you.
How a cochlear implant works. Sounds are picked up by the sound processor, which sits behind the ear. These sounds are turned into digital code, which is then sent to the implant just under the skin. The implant converts the code into electrical signals and sends them down to the electrode array. The electrode array is fitted in the person's cochlea. When the signals get to the array, they stimulate the nerve fibres in the cochlea, and the signals are recognised by the brain as sound.
Okay. So cochlear implant candidates. So you're a candidate to receive a cochlear implant if you have severe to profound hearing loss. So if your hearing loss is just mild or moderate, then usually hearing aids are sufficient to provide enough access to sound that you can learn to function in a speaking world. But if you have severe to profound hearing loss, then cochlear implants are going to provide that access better. And even adults lose their hearing, and it can be due to a virus, it can be due to a tumor, or it could just be due to regular aging process. But when it gets to the severe to profound category, a cochlear implant is definitely very beneficial, and they're very successful. As long as the anatomy looks normal, and they do MRIs and CTs ahead of time to make sure. Over 95% of them are effective, and it just depends on making sure that the brain is ready for that sound and that they do get the right kind of intervention afterwards. Okay, so the founding story of the Baker Institute. Pause it. So our founder, her name is Jenny McCall. And in 2008, she established the Baker Institute for Children with Hearing Loss. She has a daughter, Caroline Clark, who was born with severe hearing loss, which progressed and became profound. And she received cochlear implant when she was like 12. So that's kind of old compared to today's standards, but she did have better hearing when she was younger, so she was benefiting from hearing aids. But Jenny knew what it took to raise a daughter with hearing loss, and Caroline went on to be very successful. She went to Princeton, she went to Stanford for her MBA. She has her own company now in Silicon Valley. So Jenny started this nonprofit because she wanted to help other parents on this journey and give them tools and a community to do this hard work because she knew what was possible. So she came to us at Stanford and asked if we could find a way to support families with hearing loss in our community. And in this video clip, you can watch the whole thing at another time. It's on our website. It's also on YouTube. But this is Caroline giving a speech to her Stanford Business School class about her mom choosing to teach her how to speak.
Finally, at the age of 2.5, I said the word back to her. When my mom heard these words, she was so overjoyed. She cried tears of happiness. I asked her, why did you teach me to speak instead of teaching me sign language? And she said, Caroline, because I wanted you to connect with anyone in this world. I wanted you to introduce yourself and say hello. I wanted you to stand in front of an audience and express yourself and your ideas. Not a day goes by that I'm not grateful for her teaching how to speak. The ability to connect with anyone is such a privilege. I'm able to connect with anyone I can. And through the process of learning how to speak, I've grown to learn about the power of the word. I'm going to share a few short.
And we'll just watch the last
Measure life through words. Words are like seeds. When we say them, they float through the air. They can remain a seed, or they can grow into something beautiful. Words can distance, or they can connect. Words can harm, or they can heal. And words can transform lives, like they have done for me. All of you, as you go through this life, think about how we use the power of the word to connect, inspire, and to lift up. Thank you.
you. Help me go to the next one. Thanks. Oops. Okay, great. So I was honored to be able to start brainstorming how we could support other families in our community who had a child with hearing loss. So we started a conference at Stanford in 2009, and we wanted to focus on families who were getting cochlear implants for their young children. And we knew that we could make the biggest change if we focus on the youngest kids. But we also knew that we can't really teach those kids very much if we got them all together for 5 days, but we can really make a big difference if we focus on the parents. So we developed a conference that is really kind of like a boot camp for parents so that they can learn all they need to know about how the cochlear implant works, how the brain works, how their child's speech and language development should look, and how they can really, really influence their child's ability to learn to speak by using really specific strategies in their home to highlight language and to build those foundational language and literacy skills. So the families come together for 1 week every June. We're planning our 17th conference this year. And the conference is really built based on parent learning. So we intentionally structure it so that the parents start by having presentations like this, where they're learning the content, trying to understand the concepts, but then we break it down into smaller groups where they have more conversation about it. They watch video clips of professionals implementing these language building strategies. And then we role play with the parents. We say, okay, in your home, what do you do in your kitchen? Now let's think about how we can brainstorm ways that you can build working on your child's language skills in your kitchen routine. Now let's practice that together. So at Stanford, we do have families that are pretty well educated and from the Bay Area, but we also have families that drive 8 hours away. They're migrant families. Some of them don't speak English. We have Spanish interpretation the whole time. Some of the parents don't even know how to read. So we're really working with a very big variety of different language levels and learning levels. And then the last step is we'll have them practice in therapy with their child, implementing these strategies. And the goal really is that when they leave, they have the knowledge and skills they need to make a difference in their family's life, whether or not they have like a highly trained specialist in their community, because that doesn't happen for most families. So we really focus on the parents. And we really try to gently get them to a place where they feel comfortable practicing the strategies with their child, and then we kind of coach them through that. So after a few years of kind of getting anecdotal positive feedback about, oh, this is really working, families would come to me saying, this completely changed our lives. This gave us a roadmap on how to support my child. We decided to do some more objective measures of what was happening at the conference. So we gave a few surveys, a knowledge and skills survey, and of course, parents are reporting increased knowledge and skills after the conference. But the most exciting part was the change survey. So we sent out a survey to all the families 4 months after attending the conference, and we still do this. So we have almost 10 years of data now. And what we're seeing is that after attending the conference, the parents are either increasing their child's access to technology, like maybe they weren't sure if they should get a second implant, but then they decided after they learned about it that they should, or helping their child to just wear the technology more often because they understand what's happening with the brain. They're advocating for their child. They're using all these strategies that we taught them. And they're really helping their child to wear the device more often during the day. So again, if the device, there's an internal part and there's an external part. And if the external part is off, they cannot hear at all. But when it is connected, they can. So if you're thinking about toddlers, sometimes they're running around and the device just falls off. And sometimes they're mad at you and they intentionally throw it off. So these parents are having to really feel motivated to keep the device on if it falls off, in order to have the child really be able to have their best results in learning to listen and speak. And what we're seeing is once the parents understand why it's so important to keep it on and the potential for their child if they do wear it all the time, they're much more motivated to actually make that happen at home. So after having several years of this feedback, we decided, you know what, this model is really effective. How can we share the model with other places who need it? So in 2022, we decided to start our first satellite conference in Hawaii. We chose Hawaii because we actually had a family from Hawaii come to our California conference and tell us, oh my gosh, Hawaii doesn't have anything like this. We have they didn't have any providers in the whole state that had this specialty certification in teaching listening and spoken language. And they brought that therapist with them, and she learned how to do this approach. So we felt like this is a good place for us to start. Lots of vulnerable families there. Geographically, they're very separated. There's only one hospital on Oahu that does the diagnostic newborn hearing testing to confirm that they have a hearing loss. So if you have a baby on Maui and your child failed the newborn hearing screening, you would have to fly to Oahu to get this test. And you can imagine during COVID, that was really not happening for families. So there's a lot of barriers in Hawaii. And it's been very successful there. So we've been able to hold the conference there annually for 3 years, and we're planning our 4th conference. But it really just starts this community of families who can then carry on the work together. We also, I might mention this later, but we also really invest in the sustainability of our work in these other locations. So we want to make sure that instead of just training the parents and only helping this group of 15 families, we're also training the professionals in the community so that they can then carry on this work without us. So we have a mentee cohort in Hawaii of speech pathologists and teachers of the deaf who are interested in learning more about this listening and spoken language approach. And we've been mentoring them for 3 years, and we just started a new cohort of 5 more mentees. So the goal is that these families then have trained providers and that they can carry on this work outside of the conference that we hold. And then in 2024, we started an international Zoom conference. So we kind of use the curriculum we teach at Stanford, and we thought, why don't we just offer it on Zoom to whoever wants to learn? So we partnered with a foundation called Hear the World Foundation, and their mission is to send hearing aids to developing countries and train audiologists on how to fit hearing aids. But they didn't really do very much with the auditory verbal therapy piece where they're teaching the kids to talk. So we said, well, we have a curriculum for that. So we are partnering with them and training those providers on how to do this approach in these developing countries. So that's been really fun for us. And then the other area of growth has been to Kenya, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. So for Hawaii, this is kind of a picture of all of the families in that top right corner. You see the parents attending the sessions, and we have the siblings in the bottom middle of the screen. So the families all come, the whole family comes. We have a sibling camp just for the kids who are siblings. We have the preschoolers are in their own class. We have a baby class. And then the parents are in their own session. So it's very family friendly and accessible. In the bottom right corner are our professional mentees that we're mentoring in Hawaii. This is the International Workshop Series. So the first partnership we did with Hear the World was with the Latin American countries in which they have current programs. So they're already donating hearing aids and training the audiologists in those 5 countries. So we worked with those professionals. None of them spoke English, which was a learning curve for us. But thanks to COVID, we learned how to use the Zoom interpretation channel. So we actually had Spanish and Portuguese interpretation happening simultaneously while we presented in English. And that was really successful and exciting to just feel like we're sharing the things that we have learned and the knowledge and skills that we have with people who are so hungry for this information and can make a really big impact on their communities. And we're in the middle of our second round of the International Workshop Series. This one includes Bhutan, India, Jordan, Kenya, and Zimbabwe. And the time difference is our biggest challenge with these countries. So the easier part for this one is they all are English speaking. The professionals are. The families with whom they work are not all English speaking, but the professionals all do speak English. However, the time zone is like, I think 13 and a half hours from us to Bhutan. So we do have to shorten it, and we start at 6 a.m. on Saturday mornings in California. We present for 2 hours, and by the time we're done, it's like 10:30 in Bhutan p.m. So we're fitting it in. I'm just trying to find a way again to team up and support those professionals who are doing such good work. At the end of the international conferences, we do have them present like capstone presentations about them implementing the strategies that we're teaching them. And we ask them to just show like a 2-minute video clip of them doing these sessions. And it's so cool to see like them actually doing it. You know, we don't, again, this was for the Spanish and Portuguese one. So I didn't even know how to read all of that, but I'm like, look, it says, listen to me at the top, and they're doing it, and it's all in Spanish. It was really beautiful to see that integrated in a different part of the world. Okay, so Kenya. Our founder, Jenny McCall, went to Kenya just on a safari for fun with her daughter, Caroline, and her other daughter, Hillary. And while they were there, they decided to tour a school for the deaf. And their hearts really kind of broke with the lack of access to resources there. So at that school, the children were learning sign language, which was their only option. They didn't have access to hearing aids or implants. But what was sad is that some of those kids really could have benefited from implants and could have stayed with their family. So they were living at the school. And unfortunately, a lot of the girls end up getting human trafficked because they are so vulnerable. They don't have the language to really advocate for themselves. So Jenny came back and was like, can we just do something for Kenya? We have all these resources with what we've learned. Can we just implant some of those kids? So we did a needs assessment first. I literally started by Googling, like, do they do cochlear implants in Kenya? I don't know anything about this. Thankfully, they do. So the University of Nairobi has been doing cochlear implants for about 10 years. So we're like, okay, at least they can do that. And now how can we support them? What do they already have so that we can best support them? And what we learned through the needs assessment was that in Kenya, the incidence of hearing loss is 10 times higher than that in the US. And that's due to increased exposure to diseases and other risk factors that are more common in developing countries. So the need is even greater. These sweet families were just so grateful for any opportunity to team up with us and potentially have more resources. This is their audiology testing booth. You see the eggshell cartons as like soundproof. This is their ENT surgeon. This is their speech therapy room. I was like, can I just give you some of my toys? Like there's not one toy in here. They're doing the work, but with like very, very little resources. So we took that needs assessment and we figured out, okay, how can we support them with what they need? They don't do newborn hearing screening yet, in compared to the US where we're screening almost every baby. So that creates a big delay because if the child isn't identified with hearing loss until they're 2 or 3, then their outcomes aren't as good as if they were being identified at birth. So we are actually supporting that by shipping large containers of medical equipment, audiology specific, to help them outfit some of their audiology centers. Cochlear implants are not covered by insurance there, not surprising. So parents are having to private pay for that, which is not accessible for most families. So we raised money to fund cochlear implants for 11 kids last year. 8 of them have already been implanted and 3 of them are awaiting surgery now. And then we brought our family conference to Kenya last September to train the families who were getting implanted and make sure that they have resources to be able to teach their child to talk. And we're also training mentees in Kenya, just like we're doing in Hawaii, to make that more sustainable for them. So we have 10 mentees right now in Kenya, and they're carrying on this work. So the medical equipment that's in these containers are to hopefully support all of these different initiatives. USAID had agreed to help us fund shipping all of these containers, but now that's probably not going to happen. So we're looking for support with that. But there's just a really big need. So we're just trying to start by, contributing a little at a time. So these are some pictures of implanting some of those first kids last year. And then I'll just show a quick clip of one of the kids being activated. So the surgery happens, and then a few weeks later, after the incision has healed, that's when they actually activate the implant and put the external component on and turn it on for the first time. So you'll see that happening in this video. Usually we're only choosing kids to implant that were under 3 because we know that the outcomes are better. However, in this case, this little boy, Peter, he was born with normal hearing, developed spoken language like normal, and then at 9 years old, due to a virus, lost his hearing in both ears and became completely deaf, was falling behind in school. Socially, the parents were depressed. I mean, it was horrible for him. So we did implant him, and so you'll see a little bit of that activation appointment here. And this is we're making a documentary on our work in Kenya. It's coming out soon, but this is just a clip from that. No, yes, 7:15. And there's no sound intentionally right now. There's captions on if you could hover off of it. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, Peter. Hello. Naskia. I mean,
So clear that it's working for him, and really exciting for him to be able to re-engage in his school and classroom and friends. So I'll just wrap up by sharing that the Kenya conference is really beautiful. These families start with so little and they are so, so grateful. And it's been just an honor to partner with their local team and watch these kids have access to sound and watch the parents know that their child's going to be able to talk with them and interact with their whole family. We are continuing by supporting them by doing teletherapy and training their therapists to do that with families too, to keep them on track. So I'm here and I'm making other connections with Rotary clubs locally in Hawaii and Los Altos, just to raise awareness and to see if we can eventually apply for hopefully a Rotary International grant to support our work. But thank you.
Thank you so much. What an interesting program. So do we have questions? Ron, can we get Ron a mic?
First implant at Stanford for the FDA approval.
For pediatrics.
And also, this seems to be extremely complicated surgery.
You know, it does take a specialized surgeon. In the US, so it's done outpatient. It's only like 2 hours. But in Kenya, they do keep the kids for a couple days in the hospital. But yeah, it does take a specialized surgeon. The Kenya surgeons were mentored by surgeons in the Netherlands for several years before they were able to do it independently.
Because I think that's going to be extremely limiting, is the ability to get the surgery done.
Yeah, they have some surgeons, but we're trying to give them access to being able to pay for it.
Hello, thank you for being.
Oh,
Hello.
Stand up.
Okay,
Stand up.
sorry.
Fascinating, and I thought excellent presentation. When you put the cochlear implants in these 9, 12 months old, with time, does part of it need to be replaced because they're getting a little bit bigger?
Good question. So the size is not the limiting factor. Occasionally there's a device failure where they would have to re-implant just because the technology isn't working anymore, but it's actually pretty rare. And they don't need to re-implant because of size. But the external part, the technology is always being upgraded and that part can be switched out for the newer technology. Mm-hmm.
Hi, me again. I just want to say I applaud your identifying the gap, because I've known and worked with a number of people who have cochlear implants, and just the disparity between an adult who receives an implant and has had no hearing for their entire life versus a child. I don't think people realize the amount of learning that happens at such a young age around auditory, verbal communication, like all of those things, that the older you are when you're getting these implants, and if your family isn't trained to help that child or that even adult like adapt to the hearing world, words don't mean anything. Words don't have identifiers when you're just hearing them for the first time, right? It's a whole nother level of learning that's innate as a child. But if you've never had that, it's just amazing. And I'm glad that people like you have identified that gap so that people can learn to teach those skills when that happens. Because it's not just about the device. The device will still, not overcome all of those barriers alone. So thank you.
What does it typically cost? And how long does the surgery take?
Mm-hmm.
you find that the self-payment covers insurance and most policies?
Mhm.
And are you finding potential patients that not have features?
In the United States, insurance does cover the implants. It costs like $150,000 for the surgery. In Kenya, though, it's only $27,000 for the surgery, the hospitalization, and 1 whole year of audiological and speech therapy follow-up, which is why we were so eager to support them and knew we could expand to support 10 or 11 kids. Did I answer all your question?
What does the cochlea hook up? How do you get it from the cochlear implant into your brain?
So the auditory nerve it does connect with the cochlea. So once the electrode is inside the cochlea and transmitting the signal, then it is received by the auditory nerve of the brain. The external part needs to be attached. Yeah, so the sound comes in through the microphone and then is transmitted from an acoustic signal to an electric signal. And then it actually goes through a magnet that's connected to the internal part. And then that sends the signal to the cochlea. But the external part can be removed in which they can't hear them.
Where are you going to be expanding to?
Well, right now we're just trying to sustain our programs in Hawaii and Kenya, and then we'll see after that. But those are big ones that we need to kind of work hard to sustain.
Are you going to expand more in Europe?
Potentially, we're really trying to focus on developing countries that really need access to resources. So wherever that leads us.
Right.
When kids get the cochlear implants, can they still go in the water? Is there?
Yeah, they do have like a waterproof processor that they can switch to. It comes with both. So they do have a waterproof one they can use. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, for windsurfing. Yeah, for real.
Hey, any other questions? No, okay. Well, thank you so much, Julie. Let's give her a quick round of applause. And you may have heard mention of the Smart Reading Program. So we partner with the local Smart Reading Program. So as a thank you gift for being our speaker today, we'll have you sign the inside cover of this book, and then we'll get the book in the hands of a smart reader. Today's book is Not Norman. And so if you would. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you, everyone on Zoom.